It's such a pleasure to be with you folks, albeit virtually today. I had the wonderful experience of being at your museum about a decade ago, giving a presentation. And today I'm going to be speaking about something that's related, but even more comprehensive, because you folks are going to have the great good fortune in a few days of having the new skin exhibit open. And many years ago, when I was at the California Academy of Sciences, I was working gradually and slowly to develop interest in the creation of this exhibit. And I'm very happy to say that over the years, it came to fruition and is really a nice exhibit. So I hope you will enjoy it. And today we're going to take a quick tour through mostly human skin. The exhibit is all about everybody's skin, including the skin of invertebrates and other vertebrates. But today we're going to talk about humans with a brief excursion into our non-human primate and non-primate mammal relatives to start out with. So let's just remind us where we are, because we are primates, and most of our primate relatives shown here are lovely, beautiful, hairy creatures with relatively little amounts of exposed skin, at least exposed epidermis. But we're all closely related. We last shared a common ancestor about 31 million years ago, and our close relatives here, shown next to me, we all last shared a common ancestor about 7 to 8 million years ago. So we've got a lot of skin together in the game, and what is so fascinating is that there are many things that are similar about our skin, but also a few things that are conspicuously different. So let's explore. It's pretty clear that although we are genetically closely related, there are these demonstrable differences between the skin of humans and the skin of our close ape relatives. This beautiful chimpanzee has lovely dark hair covering its skin. And what is important for us to think about, we often ponder, well, what separates us from our closest relatives? Several years ago, a fascinating study was performed of the chimp genome, and that revealed that, in fact, one of the most significant differences between humans and chimps is actually in the genes that describe the skin. So this is fascinating. We often think that we're so different from chimpanzees in our intellectual abilities or in our skeletal system, but in fact, it's the skin that is most significantly different. And so let's think about just generally, what does skin do for all mammals, primates and humans alike? Well, basically, these three functions are just incredibly important. We often think about protection, because that's pretty self-evident, but also skin is really important in temperature regulation, and it's really important in communication between individuals. And I'll dwell on that toward the end of the lecture. When we look at hair in all mammals, and more broadly in vertebrates, what we see is this absolutely remarkable and beautiful evolutionary conservation of structures. Scales, feathers, and fur and hair have a common embryological origin. For those of you who study evolution, you know that this is a common theme. Evolution tends to tinker with pre-existing structures and genes, as opposed to creating, evolving new things all the time. So what we have are minor genetic modifications of body coverings that work well. When we evolved our first sort of desiccation resistant body coverings, when our ancient relatives emerged from aquatic environments, those early amphibians and reptiles, their skin evolved the basic precursors of the skin of all other vertebrates. And so this story is so interesting, and we know now so much of the evolutionary embryology of these structures. So suffice it to say, we are sort of birds of a feather, but just a little different. Our hair serves different functions than feathers, although hair is broadly insulative, just like feathers are. So one of the interesting things to recognize about our skin is that the hair itself is a very lively structure. The base of the hair follicle has a blood and nerve supply that's really important to maintaining the health of the hair. And our close mammalian relatives, this beautiful little fox has lots and lots of beautiful fur. Fur and hair are the same structures, but fur, as we see it on this fox, is multi-layered hair. And apes generally don't have this, but foxes and dogs definitely do have this thick hair that goes through seasonal cycles of shedding and regrowth. And some of you who have long-haired dogs may be experiencing this right now. One of the other fascinating things that mammal hairs can do is that because they have an active nerve supply at the base of the hairs actually can stand up to show a level of emotional excitement. You know this from looking at your domestic pet, if you have one, or even at wild animals like porcupines or other creatures that may, or skunks, for instance, just before they let fly with their scent glands, exhibit what we call piloerection, this level of emotional excitation that indicates a level of fear, anxiety, or aggression. Now, what's interesting about us is that we don't have much that can become erect. This is a real issue. Our close chimpanzee relatives have that same capacity for piloerection, for making their hairs stand up on end when they're making a display or otherwise showing fear or anxiety. But as I say, we're different in this respect. And this is one of the main ways in which human skin is different. When we lost body hair, we lost this ability to actually display our emotions in this particular way. So we really did lose more than our hair. We had to compensate somehow, and we probably compensated not only through gestures, but even before the evolution of verbal language, we evolved complex, even more complex facial expressions and the ability for our eyes to be seen at a distance. So although we have no proof that this happened in sequence, we can see no conflicting evidence to that effect. So it's interesting to ponder that our complex facial expressions and the nuances of facial expressions actually evolved as a result of the loss of most of our expressive body hair. So here we are again, back with our favorite cousin. And again, this was such an important finding that human skin, out of all of the organs in the body, out of all of the systems, was the most different genetically between our close relatives, chimpanzees, and modern humans. And the epidermis is not only hairless, mostly hairless in humans, but also it has a lot of other protective barrier functions. We know that human skin, even though sometimes it does get scratched and cut, is actually remarkably good at resisting day-to-day abrasion. It's also good, as we'll see, at resisting most or some ultraviolet radiation, as well as lots of chemical attack, bugs, stuff, microbes in the environment. It's pretty good at this because of the evolution of many enhanced barrier functions in the epidermis. So here we are. This is my very, very favorite graphic, the hairy timeline of human evolution that shows roughly the time from our divergence from chimpanzees about 7.5 million years ago when we last shared a common ancestor to the present day, to modern Homo sapiens. And what we see is that there's a lot of action occurring here around 2 million years ago when we are hypothesized to have lost most of our functional body hair and gained a lot of pigmentation. Let's look at that trade-off. The ancestors, our ancestors, early members of the genus Homo, evolving in equatorial Africa around 2 million years ago, were modern in many respects. They moved around quickly, they could run, they could walk fast. Their brains were not quite as large as ours today, but in many respects, they were really modern. And as far as we can tell from reconstructing their activity levels, they built up a lot of heat, which required dissipation through the surface of the skin. It is at this time, about 2 to 1.5 million years ago, that we have reasoned that we lost most of our functional body hair in order to facilitate the loss of heat through sweating. And so at the same time, so in early members of the genus Homo, we have mostly naked skin and the potential for very sweaty skin. This is our primary interface with the environment. Remember, nearly 2 million years ago, we didn't have anything like clothing or body coverings. The skin was the main event. And for most of our history, naked skin has been the main event, separating us, the primary interface, separating the inside of our bodies from the physical environment and from the social environment. And so this sweat, oh, super important. We do everything we can to get rid of sweat, conceal sweat, prevent sweat from showing, but it's a lifesaver because it keeps us cool. We don't have other means that other mammals have for staying cool, so evaporation of sweat is really important. Hair impedes evaporation, and so this is the reasoning behind the loss of most functional body hair. And so these wonderful creatures, including Fido on the left and our distant mammalian cousin here on the right, they have other methods for keeping cool through panting and by having big noses with lots of veins that can help to transmit cool blood from the surface of the nose to the base of the brain. We don't have these same mechanisms. Primates just don't. And so primates must lose heat from the surface of their body and mostly by evaporation. So here's our beautiful baboon cousin, able to sweat, but not nearly as much as we can. And when it gets hot after running a fairly short distance, what happens? It stops and it has a rest, if it can, in the shade. So we lack these specialized cooling mechanisms and we evolved sweating. So again, This is an important finding. This was a really important part of our own work on the evolution of human skin, figuring out the sequence of events. So here we are, our beautiful ancestors with mostly naked, potentially very sweaty skin and darkly pigmented skin. One of the things we never talk about with respect to the loss of hair or fur is that we lost an important sunscreen. In mammals, fur serves a bevy of functions, lots of different kinds of protection, as well, or including protection against strong sunlight and ultraviolet radiation. When we lost most of our body hair, we had to gain protection against ultraviolet radiation through some other means. And that was the evolution of permanent dark pigmentation. So here's our sparse body hair. There's the little vellus hairs on the right that we have on our most of our body. They don't do much to protect us from the sun. There's our guy again, and there is the strong sun beating down on all of our ancestors. The power of sunlight, not only positive, but the negative power of sunlight cannot be overestimated. Especially the ultraviolet radiation in sunlight is probably one of the most creative forces in biological evolution, because so many organisms, whether you're a moss, a plant, including trees, or any kind of terrestrial vertebrate or invertebrate, you have to figure out how to deal with strong sunlight, especially if you live near the equator or in another area of strong sunlight. What we have been able to do in our own work is actually quantify the amount of ultraviolet radiation that different parts of the Earth's surface get. We used NASA data sets, and here I'm referring to work that my husband, George Chaplin, and I have done together over the years to study levels of ultraviolet radiation at the Earth's surface and relate those to the properties of human skin, including skin color. And what we can see here is that not surprisingly, the highest levels of UV are over the equator, but cloudy areas like West Africa and Amazonia tend to have lower levels. They show up here as blue and purple as opposed to bright pink and red. And then note that this huge area in northern Eurasia is really low and highly seasonal levels of ultraviolet radiation. This helps us understand the story of human pigmentation as it evolves in the next few minutes. So here's our beautiful early member of the genus Homo with his lovely darkly pigmented skin replete with protective melanin pigment. So from what we can understand from comparative genetics and genomics is that this darkly pigmented appearance, this protective skin, this protective pigmentation evolved as a result of what geneticists call a selective sweep, strong positive selection that eliminated variation in one of the key genes that determines skin pigmentation, specifically that controls the type and amount of eumelanin pigmentation, or melanins in general, in the body. So here we are, and according to our lovely hairy timeline, what we can see is that we have continuous evolution of dark pigmentation and enhanced evolution of dark pigmentation over time in the human lineage, right up to the present time, right up to Homo sapiens living in equatorial Africa today. What we know is that modern Homo sapiens emerged from a pre-existing Homo erectus-like ancestor in Africa about 300,000 years ago, and that during that period, from 300,000 years ago to the present, we evolved all of the various trappings of modernity, everything, language, tools, complex tools, varied tools, abilities to express ourselves through technology, art, body decoration, the whole 9 yards. It was an incredibly exciting time in human evolution. So our ancestors had darkly pigmented skin, and modern people living in equatorial Africa today have darkly pigmented skin. So how did lightly pigmented skin evolve? This is a really, really interesting evolutionary story. Dermatologists and doctors for years thought that lightly pigmented skin was sort of the norm, the basis for human skin. Well, it's not. Lightly pigmented skin evolved fairly late in the game as small populations of Homo sapiens dispersed into not very sunny parts of Eurasia. So when we look at that pattern, here's our 300,000 year origin of Homo sapiens. We've got modern people moving around doing all sorts of cool stuff in Africa for a very long period of time. This is the majority of duration of our species spent in Africa undergoing tremendous amounts of cultural evolution and technological evolution. Small populations of Homo sapiens begin to disperse from Africa through the Afro-Arabian Peninsula and thence into South Asia and elsewhere, beginning around 80,000 years ago. I say small, and what I mean here by small populations, we're talking about a few hundred or maybe a few thousand people that are dispersing. This was not a crowd event. These were small populations of people chasing animals in order to stay alive. They had no destination in mind. They just went where the food was. Populations went into Eurasia, some into Southeast Asia after that, and some from sort of a staging post in Central Eurasia between the Black and the Caspian Sea, some into Western Europe, and some into Northeastern Asia, and then some again much later into North America. Now, the interesting thing about this, we have small populations starting out, and at each one of these points, the populations that are dispersing are also very small. These population bottlenecks were really interesting events from a genetic perspective because they reduced the number of variant genes that natural selection could act upon. So one of the things that we realized was that as humans moved into these lower UV levels in Eurasia, that they had to actually lose skin pigmentation in order to facilitate vitamin D production in the skin. When we lived at the equator or close to the equator, it wasn't a problem. We got so much of the vitamin D producing rays of sunlight that we made a surfeit of vitamin D without difficulty. But under far more seasonal sunny conditions and also much cloudier conditions in general in the far northern hemisphere, it was hard for us to make sufficient amounts of vitamin D in our bodies to stay healthy if we had darkly pigmented skin. So this was natural selection in action for loss of pigmentation, not gain, loss. So light skin is really best thought of as depigmented skin. And this depigmentation is fascinating because it occurred largely independently from independent genetic events, positive selection acting on different genes that affected, in turn, pigmentation pathways. Evolution is pretty cool. And we have a lot of genes in mammals that actually affect pigmentation. And what happened in the course of these different dispersals and bottlenecks is that different genes were available for natural selection to act upon, and those underwent strong positive selection because of the importance of vitamin D. So let's think about these other functions of human skin. I love to think about the importance of communication because in all our relatives, communication through skin, through grooming, is really, really important. Primates are very touchy-feely mammals. We bond through long periods of infant bonding and through bonding with our peers. We do this in large part through touching, especially in non-human primates that have less of a verbal or audio repertoire than we do. So touching, physical closeness is super important, and the properties of skin, even in hairy primates, are really important and conducive to the production of hormones that favor even more social contact. Touch feels good. And so babies especially need a lot of caring touch, and they get it. And even adults, we know that when adult primates, when adult females are good social partners, when they groom one another a lot, their infants are better off and they have a better chance of survival. So basically, being good chums through touch, through grooming, is really important in primates. And here, these poor little juvenile macaques shivering in their timbers in the winter, but staying warm and comforting one another through touch. Really, really important. And our close relative chimpanzees, these are super touchy-feely animals. Social cohesion through touch is really important in our bigger lineage of primates. And so this is one of the major social behaviors that we see in primates. We even see it in lots of non-primates. Lots of animals, lots of mammals, horses, dogs like to touch one another in an affiliative way, in a nice way, not biting one another. And that confers relaxation and social reassurance. And grooming partners in primates can really be sort of good friends, long-lasting friends. These grooming partnerships can last for decades. And importantly, they start really at birth with the supremely caring touch of mothers on infant bodies, including, as this lovely photo shows, an infant hand. Human infants, we know, benefit just terrifically from human touch, whether it's from a mother or another caregiver. Sustained, caring touch is incredibly soothing and important. And it's not just sort of a nice thing, it's really necessary for normal growth and development. Affiliative touch, normal, caring touch, like this father's caring massage, is absolutely essential for normal infant physical growth, as well as emotional growth and stability. This kind of bonding, not only with eyes and voice, but through touch, it's like multi-channel reinforcement. This is good stuff, I am safe and secure. And the need for touch does not diminish with age, although we pride ourselves on communicating in this virtual way and through the phone and other remote means. Carrying touch, there's no substitute for it at any age. And it's really essential for the maintenance of human equanimity and feelings of well-being. So we thrive on social touch. And even there are now many studies that show that even a casual touch, for instance, a nice pat on the shoulder, can be really reassuring and comforting, even if it's just transient and even if it comes from someone who's a stranger or not very closely related to you in any social sense. We are touchy-feely primates, even though much of our lives now is legislated against those kind of activities or doesn't involve those activities. We know that touch is important in the grieving and consoling process, as well as in infant rearing and in normal caring. What do we do with our naked skin? We do a lot. Of course, we do touch one another, and we do also decorate our skin. One of the remarkable things about humans, and perhaps the distinctive thing about naked human skin, is that we do decorate it. We have no idea when we started decorating our skin because we don't get very much preserved skin in the human fossil record or archaeological record. There are a few examples of frozen skin, a few examples of mummified skin, but these are only from a few thousand years ago. We have lots of evidence from the kinds of jewelry and other decoration that humans were making, that we probably started decorating our bodies with some form of body paint and perhaps even tattoos tens of thousands of years ago. This piece of ochre from South Africa has been used to decorate some kind of hairy surface, as well as the wall of a rock shelter or cave. Humans have been decorating their environments and probably themselves for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years. We had the cognitive ability to do this, and there's every indication that we did. There are beautiful examples of ochre staining in decorative shells, for instance, that people decorated themselves with or had in their living spaces. So again, this is strong circumstantial evidence that we were decorating our environments and ourselves at this time. And certainly when we look at modern humans today, especially when we look at people living traditional lives, indigenous populations in various parts of the world living more or less traditional lives, we see that body decoration is ubiquitous. People are decorating their bodies with body paints of various kinds and/or tattoos or scars. Decorative scars. All of these things are used, some more than others in different groups, but basically when you have naked skin, and this is the primary interface with the environment, the skin is going to undergo a lot of biological evolution, as we've discussed, but it's also going to undergo cultural changes. We use it as a placard, as a billboard, to advertise our status, our age, our group identity, or perhaps things that are just important to us. So this is really important skin is a focus of social attention in people. And everything that people do on their skin involves intention. There's really nothing accidental, although we might think that it's just a superficial thing. Okay. We know that appearances count. The look of the skin is perceived, and we know that it has an effect. So skin and the decoration that we put on it is a set of signals that we have never ignored in our history. And we know that people not only affix body paints and cosmetics on their bodies, but they also choose to affix permanent changes in the form of tattoos. Tattoos have become much more common and socially acceptable in the last 30 years, and we see many people around us today with full or partial sleeve tattoos like the one that you see here. And we need to recognize that this is really just continuing an ancient tradition. It's nothing particularly new. Skin decoration really is universal. And in the parlance of evolutionary biology, we call it an honest signal. It indicates something that we want to tell the world about our age, our identity, or something that's important to us. So we know that the skin decoration takes a variety of forms, and it will continue to do so in the future as we ponder what skin decoration will be like. There will be new forms of tattoos and makeup, possibly new forms of scarring, possibly, other forms of decoration that we can sort of insert or place on the surface of our skin temporarily that will give a particular appearance under particular conditions, including, let's say, things that we can place on our bodies that will show up under particular light conditions or light-sensitive tattoos. Skin decoration tells the world about us, and we're going to continue to create lots of provocative new tech in this way to tell the world about us in different ways, and probably also to take advantage of the many types of ink and other implantable technologies that are reversible, that allow us to not necessarily make a permanent commitment to altering our skin. And again, skin augmentation isn't just decoration. Just decoration. People say, skin is superficial, hair is superficial. These are incredibly important things. We assess people according to how they look, and to some extent, we judge them according to how they look. So everything about the skin is intentional, or certainly most of the augmentation is intentional, and it will have some kind of a cognitive and social effect. And we know that people have been making really lavish decorative tattoos for a very long period of time. There are some beautiful preserved tattoos from these Siberian herder and steppe living people, really lavish, beautiful tattoos that would have taken a long time probably to fix. Just beautiful designs that presage our modern sort of full sleeve designs. And, again, we haven't changed that much in the 5,000 years since these tattoos were affixed. And we know that wildlife designs and designs of fictive animals remain incredibly popular. And they're more validated because so many celebrities, whether we're talking about sports celebrities or movie celebrities, screen celebrities of various kinds, because many of these people now have tattoos. This has really allowed tattoos to be reborn and brought more into the open, from the back room of sort of early 20th century tattooing to the boardroom of later 20th century and 21st century tattooing, with many workplaces now, including executive workplaces and law firms and medical offices, permitting their staff members and professionals to be visibly tattooed. So this is a big part of modern life and what we do with our beautiful naked human skin. And these statements will continue, as I said, to evolve in myriad fascinating ways. We make statements through our skin, just like other vertebrates make statements with their skin, but perhaps not quite as diverse and individually specialized as ours. So the skin is really our album of evolution, but a unique album that is distinctive to each one of us. The conspicuous pattern of wrinkles or age spots or makeup or body paint or tattoos that we have is individual and defines our lives as individual cultural beings. So we share a lot with other vertebrates, other mammals, other primates, but this individuation of appearance is really a human characteristic. So thank you, folks. I hope I've given you enough space to ask some questions about your skin and the skin of other creatures. I'm very grateful for the invitation to come to you, albeit remotely, to speak with you at Lunch Break Science today. And I'm going to shut up so that you guys can I hope, ask some questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jablonski. So Dr. Jablonski, the question is, tattoos are readily available, but how can you remove them?
Well, tattoo removal is a far more difficult process than getting a tattoo in the first place. Most of it is now achieved through increasingly efficacious modes of laser removal, but it's very time-consuming and very expensive. So compared to the expense of an original tattoo, laser removal is much more expensive and often requires repeated visits to a dermatologist or a certified technician in order for this to be achieved.
Okay, so Dr. Jablonski, the question is, so when humans lost our body hair, why did we retain like facial hair and hair on our head and hair on other areas of our body and not others?
Oh, yes. Thank you for asking that. I've been working on this with my graduate students for the last decade, and I'm happy to say that we have a good answer for the evolution of scalp hair. The short answer to this is that we retained the hair on the tops of our heads for control of temperature. It turns out that hair is protective of the surface of the scalp, and what it does is that it allows the scalp to be protected from the worst solar radiation, the worst excesses of strong UV, and it allows the scalp to breathe so that the sweat glands on the scalp can help lose heat to the environment. So basically the hair on the scalp is protective and serves a thermoregulatory purpose. The hair in the armpits And groin probably is there for the transmission of pheromones, which are still important to us, even though we try our very best to get rid of these smells in what we call civilized environments. Last but not least, facial hair in men is probably related to the evolution of signaling, social signaling. We know that beards and different colors of beards, according to age, give first of all, an immediate indication of hormonal sex, gender, and they give an indication of age. So you can generally tell a younger man from an older man. And there's no experimental evidence to show that these are salient social signals, but we know that they are important social signals. The presence of a full dark beard, for instance, indicates a much different kind of individual than the presence of a full white beard, either close cropped or Santa Claus like, because it immediately denotes age. And so we would guess and hypothesize that these were, again, important social signals. And I wish there was some adventurous anthropologist who would do a good experimental study of the value of beards, mustaches as social signals. I've got the experiment all designed. I just need a colleague to take me up on it.
So, Dr. Jablonski, the question is the human body continuing to adjust to environmental changes and levels of UV radiation and that sort of thing?
Yeah, really good question. I think one of the fascinating things about modern people is that in the last few thousand years, we've become very good at basically creating a series of functional barriers against natural selection. We take care of one another. We go to the hospital. We live in buildings. I'm looking at fluorescent lights above me. We're basically buffered from the external environment by our cultural accoutrements of all kinds, including clothing. So I'm not saying that we're completely cut off from natural selection, but we mostly are. Changes in skin pigmentation are occurring in humans as people from different parts of the world interact and have babies with one another. So we have different mixtures of skin pigmentation genes and different episodes of gene flow or admixture that are producing different color combinations, as it were. But there's very little in the way of active natural selection that's going on, because of the effectiveness of these cultural buffering mechanisms that we have evolved for ourselves. But having said that, those aren't infallible, because we know, for instance, that we pay a price for our civilization through partly vitamin D deficiency. Most people today who live indoors, who work to protect their skin from sun damage, or who simply don't have the opportunity to be out of doors, don't have enough vitamin D. And so we actually are increasing the likelihood of vitamin D deficiency related diseases, including some infectious diseases, as a result of being vitamin D deficient. So if natural selection is acting at all, it's probably acting in some cases on individuals who are particularly vitamin D deficient and particularly prone to particular infectious diseases and other ailments.
All right, looks like that's it for questions. Again, Dr. Jablonski, thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you all for joining us, helping us discover more about our world.